Look, I did something this weekend that I have never done before, something that I experience as super duper exciting. Something that brought me a tremendous amount of satisfaction and joy, and that is, for the first time in my entire life, I hit a bullseye with my bow and arrow. Now, this is something I was trying to do as a kid, as a Cub Scout, and as you know, recently, about 2 weeks ago, I picked up the hobby of archery and I've been shooting a compound bow. And this past weekend, I hit the bullseye, and it was super duper exciting. So I want to tell you how I did it. And I want to tell you why that matters and how it relates to solution-focused brief therapy, because how I did it was practice. Now, I get over 100 emails every single day from people asking me questions about how to implement solution-focused questions in their work. And one of the things I notice is when people are trying to apply solution-focused brief therapy in the work, they try to ask like the bullseye question. So they try to ask questions and each and every question to make a difference. And it doesn't really work that way. Like, number one, you have to practice to be able to articulate your questions in such a way that they are more likely to generate the type of response that would lead to change in the client's life. But in order to do that, you have to be willing to fail. You have to be willing to ask questions that do not hit home. You have to be willing to ask non-bullseye questions in order to get to the bullseye. So in order for me to hit that bullseye, I had to take probably 200 shots. And if you remember, I actually made a recording of the very first shot I ever took, and I missed the target by literally feet. But I had to be willing to continue to pull the string back and just keep firing and keep firing and keep firing, knowing that some of these arrows are not going to hit the bullseye. And the same thing is true. Like, when you're thinking of the question you're going to ask the client, you have no way of knowing if it's going to be the type of question that makes a difference in their life until you hear their response. So instead of trying to think about how do I ask a question that produces like the bullseye response, instead I want you thinking about like, I'm gonna work my hardest, I'm gonna practice my best, I'm gonna ask questions that are more in line with leading towards change than not, and then knowing that eventually I'll get more consistent at hitting the target with the questions. That's really the only way to get good at any new task. Whether you're talking about archery or drawing or painting or whatever, you have to be willing to make mistakes. You have to be willing to be a novice in order to become an expert. And sometimes it takes time. So I want you guys to realize it's not about the bullseye, it's simply about the next question. In the same way that for me, it's like, it's not about the bullseye, it's simply about the next arrow. Like, I just have to be willing to keep firing until I get consistent at hitting my target. And even then, when I get consistent at hitting my target, I'm not gonna hit it every single time. And the same thing is true for you guys. Like, you have to practice your solution-focused questions until you get consistent at asking questions that are more likely to produce a response that leads towards change. And even then, you're not gonna do it every single time. But it just takes practice to master that skill. And the fun thing is once you get good at it, you get consistent, it's incredibly satisfying. Like this weekend when I hit that bullseye, it was incredibly satisfying to do that. And as I continue to practice, it's incredibly satisfying to be able to hit my target more consistently. And it's the same level of satisfaction as I was practicing and getting good at solution-focused brief therapy in the beginning. It's just an amazing experience to go into your sessions with confidence that you're gonna ask the kind of questions that produce change, regardless of the client problem. And I notice that it's the same satisfaction as I do this. When I draw the arrow back, it's such an amazing sense of satisfaction and confidence that when I draw the arrow back, when I let it go, it's gonna go where I want it to go. It's gonna go towards what I'm aiming at. So I want you guys to practice so you get consistent. It's incredibly satisfying.